This training flight could have ended in a disaster. Right after takeoff, after doing a touch and go, we weren't climbing and we were skimming the roof of an office building, so close that even the airport tower had to call us and ask if we needed assistance. This happened because of a simple yet crucial mistake that my flight instructor had made, improperly retracting flaps right before takeoff. Today I'm breaking down what went wrong, how we barely avoided a disaster, and how you can avoid the same mistake in your training flight. But before we dive in, I need your help. I'm creating an aviation community on Skool where I share insider training insights, career tips, and insider knowledge to help you become a pilot faster. If you sign up right now, I will give you lifetime access to my paid Skool community completely for free. Inside, there are 5 weeks worth of knowledge that I have learned throughout my 6 years of being in the industry, everything from being a student pilot all the way to my ATP and flying the Embraer 175. So click the link in the description below and I will see you inside of Skool. All right, so let's break down exactly what happened and how we ended up in this dangerous situation and what you need to know to prevent this from happening to you. Welcome back to the Pilot Accelerator Academy YouTube channel. This is the third episode inside of the series that I'm calling My Aviation Mistakes and How to Avoid It. Today we are flying again out of Centennial Airport. This specific story that I'm talking about is a training flight that I was doing when I was a student pilot. I was flying with a different instructor, not the instructor that I was normally flying with, and the person who was giving me all the information I needed to become a private pilot. This was a different instructor that I was just trying out and seeing what I can learn from him. I believe this was the second flight that we had done together. We started out flying out of Centennial Airport. We started generally around this area of the airport. We got to the airplane, did all of our pre-flight checks. We looked at the weather, everything looked good. Once we got in the plane, did all of our pre-flight, started. We ended up going down to the run-up area here. Did our run-up, did some checks, made sure the plane was airworthy, everything was good. Once we got our ATIS, we got all the information that we needed. We called up ground, told ground that we wanted to do touch and goes in the pattern. So once we made the call, they transferred us over to taxi on Alpha down to the beginning of the runway here. Transferred over to tower. Tower cleared us for takeoff. Ended up taking off of 17 left. It was a normal takeoff. Everything was good. Everything was fine. We transferred over to the second tower frequency so we can do touch and goes off of 35 right. 17 right. We did multiple touch and goes. Everything was good. This flight really was more of like an evaluation flight for me from him. He wanted to see where I was at in my knowledge and where I was at in my procedures of being a pilot and get me up to speed if I wasn't where I needed to be. So we did multiple touch and goes. He was just letting me fly the plane. One of the big things that you as a student pilot need to recognize is that even though you are a student pilot and you are not necessarily the PIC, the pilot in command, you need to be acting like you are pilot in command because you are trying to become a private pilot so that you can become a pilot in command. So with that being said, we did multiple touch and goes. Everything was going good. On this one round of touch and goes that we were doing, about on the midfield right downwind around, that's a little bit too close. We're probably right around this area, midfield right downwind. My instructor, which I'm not going to name, he ended up telling me that on this touch and go, I don't need to touch my flaps, my flap lever, because he will retract the flaps for me. So once we get down to our crosswind, we go hit our final, come in for a landing, do a touch and go. It was a good landing. I put in power, start taking off. Don't touch my flaps because he said I didn't need to. We start getting to the end of the runway and I'm noticing something's wrong with the plane. We're not taking off as we should be. It's not performing like we should be. We're not climbing like we should be. Something's clearly wrong. I'm looking at him. He's looking at me like, why are you looking at me? And I thought it was kind of implicit by my look, like what's going on. Because right about the end of the runway, we are not at the altitude that we should be. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm still flying the plane. Everything seems to be fine. I don't hear any problems with the engine. I'm not seeing anything wrong with my gauges or anything like that. So there was no inclination that anything was wrong with the plane. By the time we ended up crossing this highway, which is E470, and we got to about this golf course here, I remember looking out the window and we were not very high off the ground at all. I explicitly remember looking down at some golfers who were looking up at us because we were so low to the ground. And just to give you guys an example for how low we were, this is an office building right here. And this is the departure off of 17 right. Right about here, I remember looking and barely being able to see the top of the roof. This is only about a 120-foot building. We weren't more than 120 feet above the ground back here, where we should easily be at close to 600, 700 feet already. So we were extremely low. At this point, my heart is racing because I don't know what's going on. I'm looking and thinking, worst case scenario, where am I going to have to put this plane down because something's clearly wrong. Then something just tells me to look at the plane on the inside, see if I can find anything that's going wrong. I look down at the flap lever, and the flap lever is not retracted like he said he was going to. The flap lever was still halfway, so we ended up taking off with half flaps. If you're a student pilot and you don't know yet, you're not supposed to take off in a Cessna with flaps. At that point, you're taking off with too much drag, and it brings down the performance of the airplane. Clearly, by this example of what I'm showing you guys, you don't take off with flaps in. So it was my mistake for listening to my instructor and believing that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. He was an older gentleman at this point. After I identified the issue, I told him, I flip up the flap lever and the plane starts climbing normal again. We start getting airspeed, we start getting an increase in our VSI, and we're starting to climb off. Everything was good. Luckily, nothing catastrophic happened, but I was very much looking for a place to land anywhere in this area. It was very nerve-wracking and scary for me, and upon evaluation after the flight, once we got on the ground and the training flight was over, I couldn't help but think that the instructor was putting me through a bit of a test. As I said before, when you're a student pilot, you need to be acting and treating your airplane as if you are the pilot in command. Even if you're with an instructor who has more hours than you, who has more experience than you, you still need to be acting like you are the one that's in charge of that plane. You are the captain.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
I brought that up to him. He denied it, said that it was just an honest mistake. But honestly, with the amount of hours that this guy has, especially being a flight instructor in Cessnas, I have a hard time believing that retracting the flaps halfway was an honest mistake, because with the certain flap lever that we had in that plane, you can literally just flip up the flaps and they will go and completely retract. So I think he had to put effort into grabbing the flap lever and moving it halfway. All right, so some main takeaways I can give you guys from this lesson. Some of the things that I learned. One, try not to put so much weight on your instructors. They are still people. They can make mistakes. And they do test you. There are flights that you will have with instructors where they will test you. They will test whether you are getting distracted with something that does not need to be dealt with in the present moment. Something as simply as dropping a pen and asking you to grab it while you're in a critical phase of flight. Instructors will do that. They have every right to do it, and they're even required to do it, just to test your knowledge of what is critical and what is not. So being able to identify certain things as being tests could be huge. And number two, just because someone says that they're going to retract your flaps, verify that they're retracting the flaps when you want the flaps retracted. As I said before, as a student pilot, you need to be acting as if you're a pilot in command. You need to be acting as a private pilot already. You are in command of the ship. You are the captain. That is your plane. Act like it. Luckily, nothing too crazy happened, and that was the end of that. It was a scary flight for me, especially because we were buzzing the tops of this building here and looking down at some golfers. There was a couple more buildings right here. We were not very high off the ground. Tower had even had to ask us whether we needed assistance or not because we were so low. So that's the end of this video. I hope you guys learned something. Act as pilot in command and verify everything your flight instructors do, even though they have more experience than you. Act as if you're the pilot in command. Command the ship. I will see you guys in the next video.